If you're watching this, don't go looking for the house. My watch stopped 3 days ago, but I've been inside for decades. What if I told you there's a house in rural Pennsylvania that doesn't just trap people? It traps time itself. Before we dive into this nightmare, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see what we uncover next. This is the story of the house that devours time, and everyone who enters it. Deep in the mountains of central Pennsylvania stands a house that local records show has existed for over 200 years. But here's where it gets disturbing. Every family that's ever lived there has vanished without a trace. The Whitmore family, 1823, gone. The Hendersons, 1847, vanished overnight. The Castellis, 1963, disappeared while neighbors watched TV in the next room. But it wasn't until 1987 that researchers first documented something truly impossible. Dr. Margaret Chen, a temporal physicist from Penn State, led a team to investigate reports of time disturbances around the property. They set up equipment around the perimeter. The electromagnetic readings were, well, let me just say they defied every known law of physics. This is the only surviving footage from Dr. Chen's expedition. The shadows seemed to move independently of the sun. The windows appeared to be different sizes depending on the angle. Dr. Chen's team documented 47 temporal anomalies in just 3 hours. But what they found inside changed everything we thought we knew about reality itself. Drop a comment if you think you could survive what's coming next.
I spent weeks interviewing locals. Most refused to talk, but a few had stories that will chill you to the bone. Sarah Mitchell, a 73-year-old local, told me her grandmother used to clean that house in the 1940s. She'd go in at sunrise, but when she came out it would be sunset. Same day, mind you, but she'd aged a full week every single time. Former Sheriff James Crawford stopped responding to calls about that place after 1979. He lost 3 deputies. They went in together, came out separately, 3 months apart, but swore they'd only been inside for 20 minutes. But the most disturbing testimony came from Maria Santos, whose brother disappeared in the house in 1995. She watched him go in from her car, never took her eyes off the front door. 3 hours later, he came walking out. But he was older. Gray hair, wrinkles around his eyes. He looked at her like he didn't know who she was and said, "Maria, is that really you? You look exactly the same as when I went to high school." He'd experienced 30 years inside that house. She'd experienced 3 hours. The skeptics called it mass hysteria. Dr. Robert Hayes from the University of Pittsburgh led a debunking mission in 2003. He insisted that time doesn't work that way, that these people were clearly suffering from shared delusions, probably triggered by local folklore and isolation. Dr. Hayes spent 6 hours in the house with a full camera crew. He emerged alone, 17 years older, clutching a journal filled with entries spanning decades. He wrote the same sentence on every page: "The house is hungry." If you're brave enough to see what we found inside, smash that like button now. Against all logical judgment, my cameraman Jake and I decided to investigate ourselves. We brought enough equipment to document everything: thermal cameras, EMF detectors, and most importantly, synchronized atomic clocks. Jake had filmed in supposedly haunted locations before, but he told me this felt different. The air itself seemed heavy, like it was pressing down on us. We approached the front door at exactly 3:17 p.m. on October 15th. The moment we touched the handle, all our clocks began ticking backward. The interior defied all architectural logic. Rooms connected to other rooms that shouldn't exist. Hallways that led back to themselves. And everywhere, clocks. Hundreds of them, all showing different times. One clock said 3:17 p.m., another said 11:42 a.m., and a grandfather clock showed a date from 1823. But it wasn't just the time displays, we could feel it. Seconds stretching like elastic, minutes compressing into heartbeats. In the main parlor, we found our first evidence that others had been there before us, carved into the mantelpiece. Day 847. The clocks are getting louder. MC. MC. Dr. Chen's first name was Margaret. We checked our equipment. We'd been inside for 12 minutes, but our synchronized atomic clocks now showed we'd been inside for 4 hours. That's when we heard footsteps coming from the room we'd just left. Footsteps and the sound of someone watching us through the shadows. Comment below if you think we should have left right then. Following the sound, we entered what appeared to be a study. The walls were lined with journals, diaries, and research notes spanning centuries. Every entry described the same phenomena we were experiencing: temporal displacement, aging at different rates, the feeling of being watched by something that existed outside of normal time. I found handwriting that looked fresh, dated with today's date, but the entry talked about being trapped for months. I opened a leather-bound journal dated 1847. The final entry made my blood run cold. Day unknown. The house feeds on Chronos itself. We are not prisoners. We are food. It digests our years, our decades, our entire timelines. I can see my death approaching in the grandfather clock's reflection, but also my birth, my childhood, all happening simultaneously. The entry was signed Heinrich Henderson, one of the families that vanished in 1847. That's when Jake grabbed my arm and pointed to the corner of the room. There was something there, in the shadow. It was shaped like a person, but it was moving wrong. The shadow didn't move like normal shadows do. It moved independently, deliberately. And as we watched, frozen in terror, it began to wave at us. But here's the truly horrifying part. We recognized that wave. It was exactly how Jake waves at the camera. We were looking at a shadow of Jake, but Jake was standing right next to me. Like this video if you want to see what happened when the shadow started moving toward us. We ran, through corridors that seemed to stretch infinitely, past doors that opened onto rooms we'd already been in, around corners that led to the same hallway. Jake said the hallway was getting longer. We'd been running for what felt like 10 minutes, but the door we came from was still right behind us. I checked my watch. We'd been running for 3 seconds, but my legs felt like I'd been sprinting for hours. Then Jake disappeared. Not gradually, instantly. One moment he was next to me, the next moment he was gone. But I could still hear his voice echoing from somewhere impossible. He said he was in the kitchen, but it wasn't the same kitchen we'd passed earlier. Everything was covered in dust, like it had been abandoned for decades. I followed his voice, but every room I entered was empty, until Jake appeared in the doorway. But something was wrong. His voice sounded different, older. When I asked how long he'd been gone, he said 2 minutes felt like years. He'd watched the seasons change through the kitchen window, watched the wallpaper fade and peel, watched his own reflection age in the dirty mirror above the sink. Share this video right now if you think Jake experienced years in just 2 minutes, because what we found in the basement proved that time in this house doesn't just move differently, it moves in every direction at once. The basement stairs descended much further than should have been possible, and the smell, it wasn't decay or mold, it was the smell of time itself, metallic, electric, ancient. In the basement, we found watches, clocks, timepieces of every era, all broken, all stopped at different moments. Some showed times that haven't happened yet. Others displayed dates that never existed. But it wasn't random destruction. They were arranged in patterns, spirals, as if someone or something was trying to map time itself. Jake found a pocket watch that was still warm. The hands were moving, but they were moving through the face of the clock, like the glass wasn't there. I picked up a digital watch from 2019. The display was cycling through dates rapidly, forward and backward through time, showing me glimpses of when it was lost, when it was made, when it would eventually break down completely. In the center of this temporal graveyard stood a single grandfather clock, its pendulum swinging despite being broken into pieces. As we approached it, we began to hear something that made our blood freeze. We heard voices, dozens of them, having conversations. But these weren't just any voices. They were the voices of everyone who had ever been trapped in this house, echoing from different time periods simultaneously. Hit subscribe if you want to hear what the voices told us about the true nature of this nightmare. The voices weren't coming from any single direction. They surrounded us, layered conversations from different decades bleeding together. A woman's voice from the 1940s said, "The children's toys keep winding themselves. Little Mary's music box has been playing the same song for 3 days straight." A man's voice from the 1980s said, "Day 34. The wallpaper patterns are changing. Sometimes they show forests, sometimes cities I've never seen." A child's voice from an unknown era said, "Mommy says we're going home soon, but the door keeps moving further away." Jake asked if they were talking to each other across time. It seemed that way. Conversations spanning centuries, people responding to voices from decades before they were even born. Dr. Chen's voice said, "If anyone finds this recording, document everything. The house doesn't just trap time, it layers it. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously here." Another voice responded, "Dr. Chen, is that you? We've been waiting for you to finish your experiment." Dr. Chen replied, "Experiment? I haven't started yet." Wait, that voice? Yeah, that's my own voice, but older. But it wasn't random destruction. They were arranged in patterns, spirals, as if someone or something was trying to map time itself. A man's voice from the 1980s said, "Day 34. The wallpaper patterns are changing. Sometimes they show forests, sometimes cities I've never seen." Then we heard something that shouldn't have been possible. Jake's voice, but older, said, "Don't go to the attic. Whatever you do, don't go to the attic. The map shows how it ends, and it's not good." Jake whispered, That's my voice. But I never said that." The older Jake's voice continued, "We've been here for 7 years now. The narrator stopped aging, but I kept getting older. The house, it feeds differently on each person." We were hearing Jake's future self warning us about what was coming. But the most terrifying part? His future voice said 7 years, but we'd only been in the house for 37 minutes. Comment below if you think we should have listened to the warning. The grandfather clock began to chime, but instead of the normal metallic sound, it sounded wet, organic. Where gears and springs should have been, there was something that looked disturbingly biological, pulsing, breathing, alive. Instead of mechanical parts, the clock was full of what looked like temporal organs, structures that seemed to process time like a digestive system. But the horror deepened when I noticed what was feeding the clock. Sand was falling upward from the floor into the clock's organic machinery. But this wasn't ordinary sand. Each grain seemed to contain moments. Jake said he could see things in the sand. Birthday parties in one grain, someone's last breath in another. They weren't sand grains, they were compressed time. We found Jake's recording device, the one he hadn't brought with him. On the tape, Jake's voice said, "Day. I don't know what day. The screaming has stopped. My screaming. I watched myself die of old age yesterday, but I'm still here, still young. The house collected my entire timeline, and now it's playing it back in reverse." Jake whispered, "I never recorded that." The tape continued. "If you can hear this, you're probably watching us explore the house for the first time. Don't trust what you see. We've been here before. We'll be here again. The house makes us forget and experience it fresh each time." Like this video if you're starting to realize that this might not be our first time in the house, because what we discovered next proved that we've been trapped in a loop of forgotten memories. We had to get out. We ran through the basement, up the stairs, through the twisted hallways, straight to what should have been the front door. Jake shouted, "There, the door. We made it." We burst through the front door into daylight and found ourselves standing in front of the same front door we'd just exited. We were back at the beginning, but our equipment showed we'd been inside for 43 minutes. We tried again and again. Every exit led back to the entrance, but each time something was slightly different. The door knocker changed from brass to iron. Windows that were boarded up became clear glass. The house was changing, adapting, learning from our attempts to escape. On our 5th attempt, we noticed something that made our blood run cold. Our own footprints in the dust, but they were leading in the wrong direction. The prints showed us entering the house, but we were following them while trying to leave. It was like the house was playing our escape in reverse, making us relive our entrance backwards. Share this video now if you realize we're not just trapped in the house, we're trapped in the house's memory of us entering. Because what we found in the attic revealed the true scope of this temporal nightmare. Against every instinct, we climbed to the attic. What we found there defied reality itself. The entire attic was covered in what looked like a map, but not a map of places, a map of time. Carved lines showing the flow of temporal currents, intersections where different timelines crossed. The symbols were dates. Some were in the future, 2087, 2134, 2205. In the center of this temporal map was a carving that made us realize the true horror of our situation. Our names. Jake Morrison and David Chen. Wait, that's not my name. My name is David Martinez, but the carving showed David Chen, Dr. Margaret Chen's son. Jake's carving showed Jake Morrison, timeline 847. Timeline 847? How many times had we done this? The map showed hundreds of carved names, the same names repeated over and over with different timeline numbers. As we studied the map, we realized we were looking at a feeding schedule. The house didn't just trap people, it trapped them in recursive loops, forcing them to experience their capture over and over, feeding off the temporal energy of repeated fear and confusion. Every person who ever entered became a permanent resident, replaying their terror infinitely while the house grew stronger. Jake pointed to a section that showed our timeline ending in 3 minutes. That's when we understood. We weren't documenting the house for YouTube. We were being documented by the house. Every timeline, every loop, every variation of our terror was being recorded and fed back into the temporal machinery. But here's the question that will haunt you. If we're trapped in an infinite loop, if this video is just another iteration in the house's feeding cycle, then how are you watching this right now? Subscribe and find out in our next video, if there is a next video. The house began to collapse around us. Walls melted into calendars and clocks. We found a door marked exit, but behind it was an endless hallway of years passing. Jake was dragged into a collapsing timeline. His footage remained, but he was gone. As time devoured me, I realized the horrible truth. The house doesn't just consume people, it consumes their entire existence across all possible timelines. Every choice we never made, every path we never took, every moment we never lived, the house feeds on all of it. I watched myself age decades in seconds, then reverse back to childhood, then forward again to old age, caught in an endless cycle of temporal consumption. But somehow, this recording escaped. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe you're watching this from inside the house too, trapped in your own temporal loop, believing you're safe in your room when you're actually just another meal being slowly digested by something that exists outside of time itself. The house that devours time is still hungry. It's always hungry. And if you're hearing this, it might have already found you. Don't look for the house. Don't try to find us. And whatever you do, don't trust any video that claims to show the truth about time. Because time isn't what you think it is. And neither is this video. The house that devours time is still hungry. Do not forget to subscribe before leaving.